great compilation tape. Like breaking up is hard to do and takes ages longer than it might seem. You got to kick it off with a killer to grab attention. Then you got to take it up a notch. But you don't want to blow your wad, so then you got to cool it off a notch. There are a lot of rules.
12 albums, 1 cent. Find our ad in Sunday's paper. Take it to your mailbox. You'll get a lot more music. You'll get a lot more life. Look in your Sunday paper.
Welcome, listener. For those about to rock, we salute you. This is our podcast dedicated to exploring and talking about the greatness that was the music of the best decade. If you're ready for the best in retro music topics on the planet, we present for your enjoyment 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse.
Hello everybody, welcome back to 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse. I am Scott, and with me tonight is Tim.
Hey everybody, we're still metal, and hopefully you are too. It's been a while.
Chris.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We're all the way metal. Let's keep this thing rolling.
Okay, so 1988. About 4 or 5 months ago, we did 1988 Part 1, and we had some technical difficulties, and then my work schedule changed dramatically, and I just could not record for a while. So we kind of took the summer off, and we are back again to wrap up 1988, and then we're gonna go on to 1989 and finish up the decade, and maybe take on a few other topics afterwards. So I'm just going to recap a little bit. We did our picks of what 1988 was, and we had Chris took Metallica and Justice for All, and then there was I believe Tim took what was it? I lost my notes. What did you have?
Crimson
Tim?
Glory, Transcendence.
Oh yes, Crimson Glory, a great album. Now I ended up having to go back and listen to some of these albums immediately after we recorded the last episode, and the homework I did find that I liked a lot of the albums that both Chris and Tim brought up, like Judas Priest, Ram It Down. I did have to go back and listen to that, even though after, back 30 years ago when it came out, or 28 years ago, I was still kind of away from Judas Priest because the Turbo album turned me off, but after Tim suggested checking out, and Chris too, I think you said it was pretty decent too, the Ram It Down album, I checked it out, and it was really impressive. Along with that Crimson Glory, that's one of the bands that have really impressed me from ones that I did not know at all. Like, I did not know Crimson Glory at all until Tim brought it up. Back in I think it was the 85 or 86 episode that we.
Yeah, it would have been 86.
86, okay. So.
And then your first pick was Operation Mindcrime, I think.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And it's an epic album that was a kind of rock opera like. So here we are. We're going back to review some of the ones that we talked about, and we're going to do some.
Well, you weren't the only one with homework.
Yeah, that's true.
Because finishing off your homework, you also were assigned Living Colors Vivid.
Oh, right. And I did not like that one at all. I tried, and it did not do for me what it did for you guys. And both of you guys really loved that album, talked a lot about it when we did the first part of 88.
Yeah, I think it goes a little bit like that too, because I wasn't a huge, like the Crimson Glory. I think it's such a different taste. You know what I mean? And sometimes you suggest something, but it's like, I could see why you like it, but it'd be nothing that I would put on my Spotify. So that's why it's kind of unique to our own musical taste. Like you chose OU812, and
which you guys,
I mean,
you guys really gave
quite
me your.
frankly, I think I would do injustice to the fire pit if I threw it in there. I would, but so it's different. You know, it is. It's just a different type of musical taste, and it was funny because you did bring up that whole. It's like OU812. It was also a difference of band members. So there's a ton of reasons why you may like or not like a particular type of music. That's why there was so much different types of music for everybody.
Yeah, you know, and I also think some of that OU812 was part of, you know, the girl that I was dating at the time was a huge Van Halen fan. So being, you know, around it so much, that might have been an influence too. Plus, you know, she's my girlfriend, so. However, she was not the harvester of sour. Harvester of sorrow.
Well, I mean, that could go either way, Scott, to be honest with you. Sour, sorrow, sour.
Yeah, either way. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I took a little homework away from that too, because the Van Halen thing. I remember so many of my friends really liking that album, and then Scott, you were talking it up, and at the time we did the 88 Part 1, you know, I had listened to it again, and I thought it was okay, but I didn't think it was, you know, mind blowing. But then I just was thinking about Van Halen and, you know, all the turmoil that was going on back then. David Lee Roth's solo career was still viable, and you know there was the whole Van Hagar versus Van Halen, and who was loyal to David Lee Roth and all this other stuff. And the funny thing to me was I learned about this band purely from MTV. The Headbangers Ball was the band, the Bullet Boys, and I remember their self-titled came out in '88, and they had the video for Smooth Up In Ya, and we thought all my buddies and I, you know, we saw it on Headbangers Ball, thought it was cool, we all bought it. I think we all got it from the record club, you know. And the funny thing was
the record club.
Are
you talking about Columbia?
Oh, of course.
Send in for a tape. You get 12 tapes for a cent or something like that.
Yeah, and you had to fill out your little postcard with all the little stickers with all the album covers.
Awesome.
But no, I just remember thinking that was so funny that album was produced by Ted Templeman. I think it was done in Los Angeles. I think it was on Warner Brothers. And, you know, you could mistake, you know, visually looking at their singer, Mark Torian, with David Lee Roth. I mean, there was such a Van Halen blueprint on that Bullet Boys album that it was like, okay, well, I guess if you don't dig Van Hagar and OU812, there's this Bullet Boys album. And I'm not comparing their guitar player to Eddie Van Halen by any stretch of the imagination. But for just a party rock Van Halen vibe, that album it's there. And I just wondered what you guys thought of it. Do you even remember the Bullet Boys? They certainly didn't do anything like as far as careers go, but that first album was pretty good.
Actually, I remember this album, and I was hoping it was going to be a something that they could follow up pretty well. I liked it. I thought the lead singer, Mark Torian, how do you say it? I don't know how you say his name, but that guy,
exactly.
His vocals are really, really good. I think he belts it out in For the Love of Money. Even though it's a cover song, it was really impressive that he was able to hit some of those notes on those screams. Just unbelievable. And I think
everyone remembers "Smooth Up In Ya." I mean, that was pretty. That was a radio. I had a girlfriend back then that thought it was Smooth Opinion.
I knew a lot of people that thought that's what it was too. That's funny.
I'm dead serious. Smooth Opinion. She would sit there in the car or the tape deck or something like that, and she would sing "Smooth Opinion" at the top of her lungs. I just kind of like, it's not. That's not it. That's not it.
I'll show you what it's about, though, if you want.
Yeah, exactly. But here's another thing too. Like you brought up Ted Templeman, but also again in the mastering. There's that name George Marino sitting down there again.
Oh, yeah, Marino.
And he also worked a lot with the mastering on Van Halen. So there's that core group of producer, engineer, you know, mastering part, and that's sometimes why you get that same sound. Not only because the band is set up to kind of look and be like something, like you said, Tim, but it's also who actually handles the recording, engineering, mastering part. It's no coincidence when the same group of people get involved that sometimes it kind of spits itself out to be something maybe they didn't completely intend, but because you have the same hands making the same cake, it tastes the same at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great album.
I got to correct myself really quick, just a little bit. I kind of bagged on their career because to me they really only ever made like 3 albums. But I know they made more than that. But to me it was really only 3. But I'm looking at Wikipedia and they've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They got like 10 or 11 albums. And I knew the singer kind of revamped things and put one out last year. But I didn't know they made that many albums. So
didn't they come back? They kind of came back, like, was it early 2000s or something like that? They came back. Sort of like around that resurgence of the 90s metal, like when all the bands were basically out of their 8-year rehab, that they kind of came back and were playing smaller clubs. And seriously, like, there's a lot of guys that just couldn't be on the road because they were just strung out on everything or had lost the desire. But then all of a sudden you get that decade later nostalgia. Or, then all of a sudden these bands start, hey, look, there might be a way for us to play 2,000-3,000 seat arenas in these cities and make a few bucks because, I didn't go to college to get my degree in accounting. So I have to make money somehow. And that's kind of, like you said, that's what a lot of these bands you don't even realize had a 10-year career after that, playing in Europe and all that stuff. It's funny because you only remember them from that moment when you were going to the record store and buying the tapes and buying the CDs and all that stuff. It's like once that stopped, their presence sort of leaves your mind until you realize, like you said, Tim, oh my God, they made like 10 more albums. You'd never know.
And I'm looking at the Bullet Boys' overall career, and I've never seen. It looks like Mark Turing is the only original band member. And if you look down at former band members, I was just counting it, it's 39.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, well, there you go.
I've never seen that many band members go through a band like that with it staying together.
If it was Spinal Tap, there would have been 36 drummers.
Yeah, right. He was just a little globule on the seat.
But on that note, though, seriously, if you can think about 5 bands that have progressively released an album every other few years besides hiatuses and things like that. Mm-hmm. And at our age, band members dying. But think of 5 bands that, say, started in the early 80s and have progressively made new music, viable new music, 30 years later. Or 35 years later at this point, which is insane to think about that. But you might be hard pressed to name 5 that have released viable Billboard million selling albums.
Well, okay. When you throw in the Billboard million selling, that takes it right off the cliff. But there are a lot of bands. There are a lot of bands in our genre that have been doing that, though. That's why I love this kind of music, because these guys keep at it. I love it.
Yeah,
like
they don't really ever stop.
Let me see if I can name 5. Saxon.
Okay.
Right. The guys from Accept. Now they kind of splintered, but Udo Dirkschneider's been active since like the late 70s, either with Accept or solo. Now Accept is back and they're kicking more ass than ever. One of my favorite bands, Pretty Maids. Oh God, why can't I? There's 3 off the top of my head, but
Def Leppard.
I don't know. They've never broken up, sure, but they have huge gaps in between their albums.
Yeah, they do.
So I'm not sure what Chris was going for there.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like there's, because I'll just use like Bon Jovi for one. Like they released and changed who they were all the way through the 90s, released different albums. They kind of became a little different, not as heavy metal, more of a rock band. Mm-hmm. Then they even went towards a little bit of a like progressive country where they were doing new albums. Like they've released new albums and done tours and, you know what I mean? Even won awards in some senses, like for years and years. And pretty much, they've only had 2 members come in and out, which was it Richie Sambora's kind of come in and out of the picture and been replaced by studio guys and other guys, and one other member who quit a while ago. I don't remember if it was the drummer or the bass player. I'm not a huge Bon Jovi historian, but so there's, that's one. Metallica has, obviously. Even Megadeth has, obviously. Ozzy sort of had released up until like the early 2000s, but then he found out that he could be a TV star, so that ended all of that. But how many more? And I don't mean, Tim, million selling is kind of, maybe that's a little too much, because it's a different type of way to sell it, because now it's a singles market released digitally. It's not fair to say I sold 1 million albums, because you don't sell 1 million albums. You download 1 million singles, and you're platinum now. That's what platinum is. It's not, I didn't write a 12-song album that sold 1 million copies. I wrote one song that downloaded 1 million times. I'm platinum now. So The whole direction of how that's even calculated is completely different. So it's apples to oranges. But I'm just saying, there's not a lot of them that have done that. And to sit back, there's a couple of people that are on Twitter that are 16, 18 years old or so, and they're 80s heavy metal music fans, and they like 70s rock, man. And I'm like, where are these kids even hearing this stuff? Obviously parents and things like that. But I just think it's cool, like you said, Tim, that a lot of bands have transcended being stuck in a genre and in a time frame and are still releasing music and then hooking these younger kids on the older stuff. And I think that's really cool. There's not a whole lot of genres of music that still are able to do that and be cool. I'm going to go to a thing or to a high school or something, and there's a kid wearing a retro Dawkins shirt.
Oh yeah,
and it's
that's awesome.
That's cool. I've seen that a ton of times. A retro re-release Dawkins concert shirt that has the actual dates from 1987 on it or something like that.
Yeah, you know what? I saw somebody.
Cool.
I saw somebody like that recently, and I'm trying to remember what. She had to be 14, and she had this classic metal band. I cannot remember who it was. But it had all the dates, the tour dates on there. I'm like, that is an awesome shirt. And
it was brand new. And I say that, and I reference that because I did see a kid not too long ago who was wearing a Monsters of Rock shirt from that 88
nice.
Monsters of Rock tour. But it was a retro new version. I mean, it wasn't faded or the lettering cracked like you washed it. You know how that always happened later. I mean, it was a brand new right out of the box shirt, and I'm a little bit jealous. I'm like, where'd you get that? I want one. So it is cool, Tim. I totally agree with you. It is neat that this genre, that's our favorite genre, has kind of bounced back and forth in popularity, obviously, but it's still fresh in some ways. There's still generations that are picking up on how cool and fun it was.
Bullet Boys, 16 drummers.
Wow. That's
nice.
Spinal Tapish. Man, that is Spinal Tapish right there. He just turned into a small globule.
One last thing, the funniest thing to me about the Bullet Boys album is, even with the length is another thing, 34 minutes, that's totally Van Halen-esque. Yeah. So all this Van Halen crap, I'm spewing about it, and then they have a song that's like an homage to Aerosmith, not Van Halen, but Aerosmith. The song "Ode to Joe" is about Joe Perry. I just find that funny.
Wow, yeah, that's nice. They have a reference from somewhere. I mean, when we were playing in a band, we wrote a couple of songs that were very much had like Cliff Burton influenced bass lines and some kind of Zeppelin-y stuff to it and all that. You know, it wasn't like that where it was titled "Ode to Joe," but you definitely have to have an influence somewhere. But that is neat. I think it's neat to see that there's people that are not only our age listening to it, involving themselves in it, listening to our podcast. For me, obviously, it's my favorite genre of music, so I'm obviously very biased.
Yeah, I believe I am too. Yeah, actually, back to this specific album one, though, I do remember a couple other songs that were Hard as Rock and Hell on My Heels. I always loved that song. Just kind of a cool groove. But anyway, yeah, it's amazing that that they've hung on this long. That that Mark has carried the name Bullet Boys for that many years, along with all the major changes in the lineup. So, yeah, that's a good one.
Well, it is funny because a named copyright doesn't have the same policies and rules as like a patent. A named copyright holds forever. So if he registered the name and he owns the name rights, there's no other band that could ever be Bullet Boys, spelled the same way or anything like that. You could hold that card forever.
One of the bands that I brought up also after we talked about our homework was Kingdom Come, which I don't think they had as many follow-up albums as the Bullet Boys, but I'm gonna see if I can find the lineup because I'm curious now how many people have come and gone in that band if they're still producing. I know you guys weren't like really impressed with this album, but it was something that I really liked at the time, and I remember it was mostly because I thought it was a nice they sounded a lot like Zeppelin. If anybody was going to replace a Rob Halford, wrong band.
Well, he's Diet Robert Plant.
Yeah,
basically.
Diet Robert Plant. Okay,
yeah.
All right. So
wait, these guys rip off Zeppelin? I thought they ripped off Great White.
Oh no, Great White ripped off Zeppelin.
I was trying to tie back to the old podcast.
Right.
No, I know. I remember. Trust me, I know. That was. I was shocked. I didn't even realize how much a Great White was really, giving tribute to Zeppelin. Especially, I totally forgot about that album that they did like a full-on tribute to him. I don't know why. I lost track of Great White somewhere along the way. But anyway, this Kingdom Come, they've done looks like about dozen or so albums since their first one, released every 2 to 4 years or so. So, but I mean, after that, I have no idea what after their first album. I don't remember any of the other stuff after that.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I'm reading here. There's an actual quote on their Wikipedia page from Jimmy Page. So obviously, you can get to the point where it gets past being a compliment, and it can be rather annoying when you've got things like Kingdom Come actually ripping riffs right off. That's a different thing altogether.
Oh, ouch!
So, and they were in the press, they were called Kingdom Clone.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there you go.
Oh, these guys. This
Lead
was a
Clones.
pretty divisive.
Nice.
This was a divisive band back then, man. People were like, they hated this band for. I don't know why they got all the ire because other bands had ripped off Led Zeppelin in the past, but for whatever reason, I guess these guys just did it a little too closely. But yeah, I remember people being really angry with these guys in the Kingdom Clone, and even Gary Moore, the guitar player, he did a solo album around this time, and Ozzy sang on one of the songs, and the song was called Lead Clones, LED Clones, Lead
Right.
Clones, and they in the lyrics of the song they make fun of Kingdom Come and Whitesnake for Still of the Night, which I thought was kind of interesting that they dared to take on Whitesnake there. But yeah, I mean they were definitely poking fun at these guys.
Oh, that's too bad. I liked several of the songs on this first album. I mean, they just caught my attention as far as like. Like you were saying, Chris, everybody has their different tastes and different attractions to different types or different bands. And, I don't know why. This one just grabbed my attention. I liked it. Everybody else seems to dislike it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw them once just on happenstance because they did play that Monsters of Rock. And so it was that 88 Monsters of Rock. They did play that show with Van Halen and Metallica and Dawkins and all that, but that was the first time I heard them, I was like, geez, this sounds exactly like Led Zeppelin. I have no reason to like this. I listen to this. I have every Led Zeppelin CD there. So why don't you listen to it? But yeah, it was. You're absolutely. This band got a lot of heat. They did get a lot of heat. And I think too, it's also a point of capitalization on a genre at some point when it's coming to an end. It's just like, sometimes these things just get thrown together, And hey, they sound like Led Zeppelin a little bit, and an agent or, A&R guy signs them and says, we put them in the studio, I bet we could sell an album, and I never thought there was really any meat to this band whatsoever, to Kingdom Come. And there's people that like them. I mean, I'm looking at their page. I mean, here's another. I would have never known they've released like 14 albums or something like that. I don't know how many of them are covers and remasters and re-releases. I have no clue. But, from 88 to 2013, it looks like there's about 14 albums here besides the live album. So, somebody like
these guys. It was funny. I ended up liking them after the fact. Like their second and third albums, In Your Face and Hands of Time. I like those better than the first one. I don't know why the first one just never grabbed me. So, Scott, what's a couple of good songs off the first album that I should go back and revisit?
I think What Love Can Be is just a really cool blues slow ballad. And then you had Do You Like It? I think it's called. And
that's on the second album. That's what got.
Oh, is it really?
See, no, yeah, that's what got me into them. Was that song?
That's a rockin' song too.
Like
Pushing
song.
Hard and Get It On were the two. Get It On was their intro, basically. That was their first release, I believe.
And the irony of this whole conversation is let's not forget that Jimmy Page and Robert Plant were just in court not too long ago with a lawsuit of how they were stealing riffs from other bands. Like that was court. So you've got a whole idea of that, and it's kind of pot calling the kettle black because they were also, the first couple Led Zeppelin albums, I mean, they stole a lot of that Delta blues and all that kind of stuff and lifted songs that were, in some senses, lyric for lyric and riff for riff enough to change it in the studio to make it sound like Led Zeppelin. But kind of little, I love Led Zeppelin, but little bit of the pot calling the kettle black there.
Well, if you think about it, everybody takes a little bit of sound from all of their influences, right?
You can't help it.
All right. I mean, it's just part of...
You can't. I mean, you're influenced by something or someone playing a certain type of music.
Right.
And it's going to be that way.
Right. So, sometimes it taking it to the point where they're calling it ripping off, or is it somewhat a tribute? And
Depends on how much money you have for a lawyer. Really, I mean that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. Like it depends because rap music itself on a different level, different genre, but is based on lifting the music track from other bands. At least in its very beginning, it was.
Oh, and they still sample the heck out of everything.
Of course they do. The difference is now you have to get permission and you have to subsidize and credit the artist that you are lifting it from. So, but it wasn't like that before. I mean, if you listen to like the Beastie Boys, there's at least 6 or 7 songs in there that directly lift riffs from Van Halen and Led Zeppelin, directly sampled riffs. So they did have to have a huge payout after that. So Plantish. The music was spot on Led Zeppelin. It was already becoming like all the hair bands and all the glitter and all the kind of makeup and stuff. It had become a parody of itself that, like you said, Tim, for some reason, that band got the finger point. Like, you are the problem with music. And it happened to be Kingdom Come, and to a lesser degree, even maybe Poison, until they took the makeup off and Bret Michaels decided to dress like a cowboy.
Uh-oh. Tim messaged me.
Oh, yeah, he did too. My phone whacked out. I think I'm okay now.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're back, Tim. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I had it on mute, and then it went away, and then it acted like I was redialing you guys, and I was like, oh, God, but then all of a sudden it magically is fine. So
it says we're still recording a call, too, so we're good there.
Okay, good. Great. Edit that out.
No. It's raw or nothing.
right?
So then, okay, as we get back into this, if we're going to continue to try to recreate what we had talked about
you know,
before,
we don't have to
Yeah.
do. I mean, we don't have to do a full on recreation of what we did. It's
just
going to
want-
be considered the lost episode.
I just want to make sure if Chris wanted to speak about the Guns N' Roses, GNR Lies. I think we talked about that last
Yeah,
time,
that
and then I
was-
want to mention Manowar.
Yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
wanted to bring that one up. So, you guys want to go for that? Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with the GNR Lies that Chris had brought up.
Okay.
On the previous show.
I mean, I brought this album because obviously the year before, the year before in '87, and it was brought up as for Appetite for Destruction was, I think it hit a scene at some point that up until this point in heavy metal music, there hadn't been not to say that the Guns N' Roses is an overnight sensation, because there's no such thing as an overnight sensation. But just the idea that this band got so big so fast, and it was kind of cool at some point that they kind of re-released some live stuff that they had done to capitalize on their popularity, and then re-released their EP before that, mashed them together, and this was right away again another million-selling album. And I think it shows the progression of the band. The covers are kind of fun, and there's an acoustic version of a song that's real heavy on the album. It showed some diversity, and then fun songs like I Used to Love Her. I just think that was kind of a neat thing that happened. And it was a very short, 7 or 8 songs, totally encompassed. I don't think it was any more than that. And a lot of times people you credit how big the acoustic scene became later, a few years later. They're always cited the Bon Jovi part when him and Richie Sambora did Dead or Alive on the stage at the MTV Awards, and Tesla releasing a thing. So it was just something that just showed a lot of diversity, really how good the band was as far as their musicianship, how they packaged themselves almost from a punk band to a rock band to an acoustic band. I just thought it had relevance, even though it was sort of covers and not a full-length album, that it had a relevance to show the diversity of these bands too, because you just think, well, they can only play loud, heavy, and fast, and that's it. And Patience and Used to Love Her and You're Crazy and One in a Million, which are those couple, that one song You're Crazy was on the album, but it was a lot harder. So, and their punk beginnings, and a really cool cover of Mama Kin. Honestly, I'm not huge on cover releases, but I thought it was a really good cover. So that's why I brought it up. There's just a lot of different reasons. It was an album, a CD that I played a lot.
Yeah, I do remember. I Used to Love Her was kind of a funny song. It was, and then there was the rumors of what it was really about. Of it being either about a girl, or ended up being about Axel's dog or something.
That's what they say. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, I remember
I
controversy.
Mean, yeah, it never.
Don't forget. This wasn't too far away from the days of the PMRC and stuff, and the parental warning, explicit lyrics, all that business was still going strong. And then here to come out with a song called "I Used to Love Her, but I Had to Kill Her," and then people would hear that and just immediately go off the deep end. And I'm sure they were kind of approaching this with tongue in cheek a little bit, But then the lyrics in One in a Million were pretty much. Not really subject to misinterpretation. I mean, it was pretty clear what Axel was singing about.
Yeah, it was fairly straightforward at that. I mean, there was no mishmashing,
I don't remember that song. What was it about, guys?
One in a Million?
Well, I mean, it was basically, there's a lot of homophobia. It was sort of a racism. I mean, it had a lot of things that were sort of going on in the world. There really wasn't too much that wasn't in that song. If you could just listen to it the way that it was, or you can make certain instigations about, well, did he say this and did he say that? There was some real issue as far as race and homophobia in that, because I think like on they're signed to Geffen Records, and it's no secret that David Geffen was also gay, and then they write this song, and that kind of didn't sit well with some other artists that were on there, and I think there were some real things that were happening down there, and I know that he made some comments of, I wrote this song as an interpretation, trying to push down the criticism of an interpretation of what he saw when he was in the streets of LA and Hollywood, and how he saw the world and all this different stuff swirling around. And, who knows if that's what he really thought, or was it artistic license and he used this because, or was it shock value? You never really know. It becomes story after story after story, but it certainly wasn't, it certainly wasn't a lot hidden in that song.
I'm going to have to listen to it just to hear what you guys are talking about, because I do not remember it at all.
Yeah, it's the last track.
Number 8
on this song. Yeah, and it's.
Reading a little bit about it.
The 3 that are the acoustic songs you've heard. So, but if you don't remember that one,
Patience, right?
Yeah, Patience, Used to Love Her. Then You're Crazy is the acoustic version of the You're Crazy on the actual Appetite to Destruction. It's just the acoustic version.
Right.
So,
and then Mamakin, of course, I remember that one too.
Yeah. And there was, I think, first couple of songs on that album were actually from the previous bands that a couple of the guys are in, like Hollywood Rose, which became, part Guns N' Roses, part LA Guns, or who knows, what that was. But so it's just a really interesting album to show the disparity of where you were, where you are, who you are, what you are, and the fact that it sold like crazy, capitalizing on their popularity from what they released the year before. That's just why I brought it up. Like I said, I listened to it quite a bit. That's really cool.
And this is I was just thinking about this, that this band actually, like, Axl's the one that kind of fell off the face of the earth for a while and was just doing that Great China controversy forever, and Slash just seemed to stay with the program and kept doing stuff, and he's been all over the place. And then I know, Chris, you're a fan. What is it? Is it Izzy?
I absolutely love Izzy Stradlin.
Right.
His solo album with Izzy and the Juju Hounds is an incredible album from front to back. It's nothing like Guns N' Roses. It isn't. It's got a little bit of punk. It's got a little bit of Bob Dylan, a little bit of acoustic, a little bit of folk music. It's really not Guns N' Roses. But let me tell you, if you put that in and you could listen to it from front to back, it's absolutely incredible album. And here's the thing, is when you look at Guns N' Roses with Appetite for Destruction, then you go to Use Your Illusion 1 and 2.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, excuse me, when you're thinking about what these songs represent and then you're writing, okay, when did Guns N' Roses realistically fall off the face of the earth? Right after the Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 albums.
Right.
Realistically, there was the Great Spaghetti Incident or whatever that was, and then whatever happened after that, and everything kind of split off into different things. But the one common denominator that is there is Izzy Stradlin was gone. And if you look at the writing credits on Appetite for Destruction and Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, he is all over the writing of the music and some of the lyrics to those songs, and some of the most popular songs. And when he left the band, the famous video where Slash, they're on the top of the building and Slash turns around, he's got a sign on his back that says, "Where's Izzy?" Mm-hmm. Because he literally just left. Like, they didn't know where he went. It's just like he just walked out the front door one day with his guitar in his suitcase and said, "I'm gone." Like he had gone back to Indiana or wherever. He just left. He didn't want to be, but he released that album after that. I'm telling you, if you get your hands on it or if you can download it and listen to it, and I don't know if you guys are super familiar with it, but I'm telling you, you'd be hard pressed to find a solo album released by a member formerly of a famous band that's any better than that. I mean, it's front to back. It's just unbelievable.
What's it called? Izzy Stradlin and the...
Izzy Stradlin and the Juju Hounds. Juju. And I'm telling you, it's
just
pretty
a self-titled
incredible.
album or what?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, I mean, just look it up and take a listen to it. I mean, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at just how good that was. And when I heard that album, it sort of triggered that makes sense to me, because it made sense after that as to what happened to Guns N' Roses. Because I think he was more than likely one of the artistic forces behind the popularity of that band and the songs that they wrote. And when he left, that band was never, ever, ever the same.
Yeah. I do like what Slash has done in the last 8 or 10 years, whatever it was, with Velvet Revolver.
I love what he's done. Yeah, I like that. I like what he did with
great band. And then with
Slash's
Miles Kennedy.
Snake Pit.
Yeah.
Slash's Snake Pit.
Yep.
He did some blues stuff. He's recorded with other artists in completely different genres. He's done some dabbling in jazz, and not to take anything away from him being a musician, because he's absolutely fabulous. He's a great guitar player, and great musician and writer of music himself. But he definitely had some staying power, after the fact, obviously more than any of the other guys did.
Right. Yeah. So that's that was we had that was a good talk about Guns N' Roses lies, GNR lies, and where they've gone, and some of the other bands that we've talked about. I want to do some of those shout outs that we had from the original podcast that is lost. And we had Maria, a good friend of mine, has been a constant contributor to the show. She, let's see, where is it? She mentioned Van Halen 0812, Scorpions Savage Amusement.
Cool, very cool.
Bon Jovi, New Jersey. And then Cinderella Long Cold Winter, which was one of our picks from the first episode of 1988.
Yeah.
Which is Cinderella is still it. I just love that band. A lot of their stuff is just so awesome. They really have that second album. That album, was that their second album, Long Cold Winter, right? I think.
Cinderella? Album. Yeah, that was their second album.
I think that
their first one was Night Songs.
Right. That Long Cold Winter is just outstanding. She also mentioned Poison, Open Up and Say Ah, which I just never did like Poison, and I still don't like them.
Even with the controversial cover artwork, you remember that?
Oh, yes, where they banned the cover, right? And they had to change the cover?
It was so terrible to show a girl with a really long tongue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just terrible. Boy, times have changed, huh?
Yeah,
I think that I don't
obviously.
think anybody would blink an eye at it nowadays. Seriously, it wouldn't even. It would not faze anybody.
Ah, come on! It wouldn't even make the news.
No,
I mean,
not at all.
It would, not at all. It would. Yeah. But I mean, Poison, greatest female heavy metal band ever, as far as I'm concerned. Oh wait, okay, my bad. Yeah.
Nice. Let's see, what else did she mention here? Kingdom Come, L.A. Guns, Rat, Reach for the Sky, and she says, don't hate, and this is something that came up, Winger. Winger!
Yeah.
Yeah. See, yeah, I think Kip Winger's a talented bassist, and he's a good musician. He comes from a long line of musicians, from what I understand. My wife is a huge fan, and what's your take on it, Winger?
Tim, go ahead. You take Winger. You take that one.
I like them a lot. I always liked them. I thought, they were great musicians. Rod Morgenstein's one of the best drummers out there. His background with the Dixie Dregs, which I never really listened to until after the fact. They weren't on my radar until Winger came around. And I love Kip Winger's voice. I thought it was cool that he used to play in Alice Cooper's band. And I want to say Paul Taylor, the keyboard player, rhythm guitarist, I think he was also from Alice Cooper's band. Reb Beach had done some studio work with Twisted Sister. And, these guys were like sidemen and hired guns or whatever. And they got together and they were huge for a couple of years. And yes, they were pretty, well, was it their fault they were pretty? I don't know. They wrote good songs. Reb Beach was one of the best guitarists of that era. I mean, he smoked, and they evolved. They totally went in for the hair metal look and the 5 o'clock shadow and the poofy hair and all that stuff. And Kip Winger did a duet with Fiona, which was a great song and a great video. If anybody remembers that, it was called Everything You Do. Kind of a little different vibe than the Ozzy Lita Ford duet that was all the rage back then. But, I saw Winger live a few times. When they opened for Kiss, and they had, a big arena show, but they were an opening act. And then later on, when they were doing their own thing in clubs, and just amazingly tight. And, they were even getting heckled at their own show. Now, who would buy a ticket to go see Winger headlining and then heckle them? I mean, to me, that's just stupid. But that happened at the show that I saw them at, the Vic Theater, a couple of years after their big Day in the Sun. And Kip Winger, he took the guy down and went right back into the song like nothing happened, and they just played an awesome show. And I really respect these guys. It's just the whole Beavis and Butthead thing and the Metallica thing. It's just whatever, man. It caught fire and everybody made fun of Winger, but they're excellent musicians who write great songs.
Yeah, and who didn't want to be that pretty as a man? Having all the girls just being completely nuts over him, right? As an older teenage boy, you wanted the girls all over you just like that. So yeah,
of course you did.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I was just jealous.
I got two. Like you brought up the friction like that with the Beavis and Butthead, and then there was the Metallica movie, when they were recording, and Lars Ulrich was throwing darts at a dartboard with a poster of Kip Winger. He was throwing darts at Kip Winger's head. So that was kind of funny. But I mean, it just wasn't to say, like you said, Kip Winger is a great bass player. Red Beach is a fantastic, Kip Winger played with some great musicians throughout his career. I mean, forget that he, was a great musician well before Winger ever showed up in the world. And so he's very, very unpolished singer, but that's what was so great about him, that he did have a great voice for the music that he played. His bass playing was exceptional, like Red Beach, and a great drummer. I'm not a fan of keyboards, so I could care less. But the other part of it was that I think, like in a music point of view from like 88, when it started, like I said, this sort of metal became a caricature of itself, at least that side of metal. All the bands started to look the same, started to sound the same. There was nothing different. You could plug band A, B, and C on MTV or into a live session or something like that, and it'd be sometimes hard, like, who is this? Is it what band is this? I can't remember. But they did have a little bit of a difference, and I think it was how they wrote their music and Kip Winger's voice that did set them a little bit apart from that whole muck up of these types of bands that were just releasing a song and you'd never hear from them again. They'd be on MTV for 15 seconds. They'd open up as the first act in a 3-act tour for 5 months, and then you'd never hear from them again. But it was just funny. Like the video for Easy Come, Easy Go was partially shot at the Bayfront Center in St. Pete. I don't think it's on that in this album, but in any case, from a winger perspective. So I was at that show. And the reason I was at that show because the girl I was dating loved winger at the time. So here, Tim, is the reason that somebody would go to the show to heckle winger, even though they bought a ticket to go see winger. It's because the only reason I went to the show is because I wanted to go with this girl. Did I want to be there? No, I didn't. But you could see it was very much a girl-driven, I'm really pretty. It had some hook to it, so there were some guys involved, but it was that they positioned themselves from an artistic and a record sale merchandising point of view that girls were buying these albums now. And they were buying them because of what they looked like, what the contents of the lyric was. I mean, they even had the song 17. I mean, how could you not say we are marketing this to high school girls? This good-looking guy who's a musician who's on stage singing about a song, she's only 17. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's not direct marketing, I don't know what is.
Yeah. That's the one that still my wife just has to crank up when she hears it.
Absolutely. And it probably came out close to when she was 17, and she's sitting up there listening to him in concert, and she's like, I'm 17, Kip, come and take me on your bus. I mean, it's like that. It's
Yeah.
So now you are 30 years later, you're like, now you can see why. It was directly marketed towards that group, period.
Yeah.
So, but I can't say anything bad at all about their musicianship because they're fantastic musicians, very professional, studio and live trained and polished musicians.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't grow to appreciate them until later in life when my wife kind of listened to it more often. I like them. So, what some of the other shout-outs? Let's see. Buddy of mine, Matt, or also known as ZD Smith, he mentioned Reb Beach also, and some of the solos were very impressive. Still touring with Whitesnake, I guess, Reb Beach. And then my cousin Josh, who likes to always throw his 2 cents in, his first pick was Slayer, South of Heaven. Slayer. And then a band called Stone. And I think it was Tim that shared or sent me the picture.
Yeah, actually,
or shared the picture.
I have that.
Album.
That record on vinyl, and it was when my wife and I were first dating back in the 90s. She made the mistake of taking me to a used record store in Indianapolis, and she got comfortable and sat on the couch while I spent a solid 2 hours going through all their record bins, and I bought like 2 milk crates worth of records because they were like a quarter a piece or whatever it was, and I was just buying stuff that had cool covers. Like, this looks cool. I've never heard of these guys, and that's funny that Stone album was actually in the giant batch of stuff that I bought, and I don't know that I ever listened to it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I think you might have brought this up because of literally the cover of the album looks like it was drawn with colored pencils.
Yes, and it looks like it was drawn in, like, let's see, what would it be? Maybe English class of your sophomore or junior year of high school. Just because you're bored or whatever.
It's also a very Kiss-like S in the Stone.
Yeah, and that's probably what caught my eye in the first place. I mean, being completely honest, and then I was like, "Ooh, who's this?" You know. But I think you guys might be talking about the back cover. Wasn't it like kind of cartoony?
Was that the back cover? Because it shows, like, if you see it on Wikipedia.
Well, I think that there's a U.S. cover, it says, that has a totally different, like, landscape with big guitars upside down that look like they're made of stone. I think the other one might be, maybe it was the back of the U.S. release, but looks like here, like that was the original European release cover. I don't know.
Yeah, the one with the guitars is the one I have. Yeah.
Okay.
And it just looked metal, a bunch of flying V's, giant flying V's stuck in the ground, and
Right,
Oh,
like they're
that
made out
one.
of granite. Like, yeah, they're made out of granite or something like that, and they're in the granite. Yeah, that says U.S. release cover.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that maybe that cartoony pencil drawing
was-
one was.
it was
they're
either
from Finland or something. So maybe it was the Finnish release or something. I don't know.
well, it is in the one I have too. It might be the inner sleeve or something, but I remember
okay,
we were talking about this before, because I think they did like a silly cover of Europe's The Final Countdown, but it's not really a complete song. It's more of a goof. But yeah, there's Stone getting shout outs in 2016. Who'd have thought?
Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, how about that one?
Yeah, that's way out of left field, and it is funny because like Slayer, that's right up my alley from.
Right on.
So shout out to Josh. Is that it? Josh Wheeler.
Josh Wheeler, that'd be my cousin.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a single Slayer album I'll say anything bad about. So
He also mentioned Metallica and Justice for All, so I know he's right there in your in your wheelhouse there.
him and I should be best friends. I don't know why he hangs out with the likes of you. The likes of you in your.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Hey,
How much did you pay him? How much did you pay him to shout out OU812, or was that just off the top of his head?
Hey, he liked Hagar.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, you know what? I'll take some of the credit for being some influence on Josh. He's about, let's see, how many years younger than me? He is got to be 11 or 12 years younger than me.
Oh wow! So there you go.
And he used to help me out when I was driving I was a contractor for RPS, and I had a awesome stereo in my truck that I put in, and I used to hire him to help me out when he was like 16, 17, something like that.
He's only 17.
and we used to just rock out to like Joe Satriani and Judas Priest and all that stuff. So it was a good time. And
That's
then
neat.
he learned to play guitar, which I never did. So
because you figure 10 years, 11 years difference. So like your 88 would be his 98, 99, which is sort of the ending a little bit of that grunge era kind of thing. So you'd think that would be his main focus music-wise, which I'm sure he maybe does like that stuff. But
yeah, I don't know.
It's just it's neat for me to see younger generation appreciate music. Like when I was in the 80s, I appreciated Led Zeppelin and music from the 70s and the 60s and stuff like that. So it's kind of neat to see that continue. I think it's a lot less and less, though. A lot less and less than it was before.
You know, like you were saying before, how the singles have taken over. You know, it's not albums anymore. And I think we grew up in a different time when albums were very important, and that's why I wanted to do this whole segment on breaking down these albums over the years, because it was about albums. I mean, you always were waiting for that next album of your favorite artist.
Well, like I can't help myself. Like I have Spotify, obviously, like digital media to download and listen to the song. I don't even download song for song of bands that I liked from back then in the 90s and all that kind of stuff. I just download the whole album because that's how I'm used to hearing it.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And even if there's a song that I don't like in my truck, or if I'm listening to it, I'll skip over it like I used to fast forward the tape. I don't like track 4. I'm going to go to track 5.
Yeah.
But I want the whole album. I want the whole experience played from track 1 to track 12, and I want to listen to it like I was listening to it when I was 18 or 20 or whatever the age when I was only 17. I want to listen to that. That's how I grew up listening to music. Nowadays, it's like this mixtape track of a song from this and a song from that, and there's like 20 songs. You play it on a shuffle, and it's what you listen to because you have no attachment to what it took to make that music. Like I always looked at it like I have an attachment to how hard this band worked to write these songs and make it. And some songs from our generation and albums were done in a particular order because it attempted to tell a story. So nowadays it never happens that way. So it's not the same experience, I think, for a listener. And the irony is that we have quicker, faster, and cheaper access to a multitude of music almost immediately, whether it's satellite radio, whether it's like a Pandora or a Spotify or Apple, where you could download whatever you want anytime you want. You don't have to go anywhere. I mean, there's immediate access to every song probably ever written.
Yeah.
And
well, like, I have a story that kind of relates to this. Just over this past weekend, I've become, over the last, I think it's maybe 6 or 7 years, I've become a huge fan of Alter Bridge. I know that they were Creed, and they've gone back and forth with different singers between Miles Kennedy and Scott Stapp being with Creed and whatnot. But I really like the sound of Alter Bridge, and they just released on Friday their 5th album. Okay, and for like 2 weeks before or maybe even a month before they released it, they would show they would post a link to a YouTube video that wasn't anything like really, really involved, just some graphics. And they released like 4 or 5 songs before the album came out that you could just watch the video. I don't know if you could actually download it and keep it. But I was determined to not download this album when it came out. I wanted to go get it. I wanted to get the CD. Now, I know it's not vinyl. I know it doesn't have that same feel of getting those old records that we used to be able to get, or even a cassette. But I went specifically and bought the CD. I even went to Best Buy to get that one because Best Buy has a bonus song on it. The Best Buy version has a bonus song, or 2. It might have two bonus songs on there that you can't get at the other stores. But I specifically drove like 20 minutes up into Newport Richey and went to the store and bought the physical CD. And this guy that I'm working with, he's like making fun of me because I actually bought an album. He's only 24. He's like, I can't believe you bought a CD. Can't you just download it and rip it if you want to listen to your old CD car or whatever? And it's funny. I still appreciate some of the artwork that's involved with the albums and just having it physically. Plus, I think you can carry it across different media types. Like if you have the CD, you can put it in several different computers without iTunes going, oh, you have this on too many systems or whatever. So I don't, I just like having that physical CD. So it's cool. I've listened to the whole album at least once, and I like it. It's cool. I was able to put it in the CD player and just listen.
Here's
and I
I
actually sat in my car with the lyrics out and was following along with the lyrics. Now, when's the last time somebody did that?
Did you sing Smooth Opinion? Or Smooth Up?
Well, if that song would have been on the album, I might have.
Yeah. Here's funny. I bought a 2017 truck, and I traded my truck in. It has no CD player. First car I've ever seen.
Not surprised.
It has no CD player, nothing. It has, obviously, you can stream things and all that kind of stuff. It has satellite radio. But you either play by Bluetooth or play by the little plug that you plug in, the little aux jack.
Yeah.
No CD player, nothing.
Wow.
I've never, I didn't even realize because we first got in the truck and I was like, because my other truck was only 3 years older and it had a 6-disc changer. And I was like, where's the CD player? He just looked at me like this 23-year-old guy who's the tech guy at Honda just looked at me like, why would you need a CD player? Like I felt every second of 47 at that moment.
Nice.
Like, this guy's looking at me like, the Stone Age had CD players.
Yeah, the cars with the CD players also come with walkers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And velour interior.
Yeah.
So it's funny, how the world does certainly change. But, first thing musically, I got in the car and thought, Where's the CD player?
Tim, you
So
still
interesting. Timothy.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Thought I lost you.
he's watching the Cubs. Are they on yet?
Yeah. No, they're on. But
Are they
I'm
on
just
now?
letting you guys go.
Oh, okay. Well, go, Tim. Speak.
No,
I'm saying I'm letting you guys go with your stories.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
No need to.
Well, that actually, that brings us kind of wrapping it up. I mean, we touched on just about everything that we talked about before, unless you guys can think of anything that we missed from the lost episode.
I wanted to bring up Manowar because when we were talking about Guns N' Roses and the GNR Lies and how it showed off the diversity of Guns N' Roses, to me this year, 88, Manowar, everyone thinks of them as the cavemen of heavy metal and wearing their loincloths and swinging their swords and just singing about metal and rock and whatever. But the Kings of Metal album, of course, title alone furthers all those stereotypes, but it's actually pretty diverse and it's cool. It's got a really heartfelt, amazing ballad called Heart of Steel. And it's got some crazy fast thrashers like you'd expect and some anthems like you'd expect. And then there's another left field thing is the instrumental Sting of the Bumblebee where Joey DeMeo plays, it's basically an extended bass solo with some guitar noise every now and then, but it really showcases his bass playing. And then there's some orchestral stuff, and there's even like a spoken word piece where the old grandfather's telling the story of the Metal Kings to his grandson. It's all over the place, but it's really cool. It's one of my favorite Manowar albums, and I'm not sure if I mentioned them during 87's podcast when they released Fighting the World, but these two albums combined are, I don't know how many hours I spent listening to these things back in the day as a teenager. Manowar did get a little sillier as time moved on and whatever, but this was the last album with the classic lineup. Guitar player Ross the Boss left after this one, and it's really cool. It's not just the same old. The lyrics are, I don't know. Manowar fans will defend this. Non-Manowar fans will just say it's just another Manowar album. But there's a lot on here. It's really cool, and they continued their little thing where they would have a song on the album where the lyrics of the song would contain callbacks to songs and previous album titles. And it's a total gimmick, but they really had a knack for doing it in a cool way. And Blood of the Kings is the big closing 7.5 minute thing on this album that does that. And I always appreciate that. I always thought that was a cool way for the lyricists to have a little fun and do something cool at the same time. It's interesting.
Yeah, that album was it was heavy in two different ways. It was heavy because it was heavy. The music was. It was also very thick with different types of music for them to play, because, like you said, they were just known as Manowar. It was metal. It was this. It was quintessential, and they did have a little bit of different things on this album where they were kind of maybe researching what they were musically on a couple of tracks. Like you said, there's some thumpers on here too, but they did kind of branch out and do a few different things as well, which I thought was really neat too. And I'm not a huge Manowar fan, but I can appreciate who and what they were. And this album I think was really good. I think it was very good.
Now you guys have brought Tim. I know you've brought this band up before, and I've never really given them a chance. So, I've kind of prided myself the last few years of doing homework, and I really think I'm going to have to go and check this one out for my homework for this time around, because you guys both speak highly of them as being rockers. I know that I've heard some of the stuff may seem a little goofy, I guess. What was the term that you used, Tim? A couple of the songs are a little
Well, they're cheesy. They're cheesy.
Okay.
I mean, it's in some ways it's like Dio. Sometimes we get bagged on as being heavy metal for 13-year-olds, and it's the same kind of thing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, look up the song. Look up the song "Kingdom Come." Ironically, since we were talking about Kingdom Come 45 minutes earlier.
Here we go.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Round and round we go.
Look up the Manowar song "Kingdom Come," "Hail and Kill," and then the cool ballad is "Heart of Steel."
And I'm dying to hear "Sting of the Bumblebee" because I've read it a couple times that he did that, and that was, what is "Sting of the Bumblebee"? That was a tribute to somebody, or
the Flight of the Bumblebee.
The Flight of the Bumblebee.
Classical piece.
Okay, right on. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I moved it because of the the speed and the type of music that they release and that they do. So they change it. But I'm telling you, you'll have a really good appreciation. You've obviously heard Flight of the Bumblebee before, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
But when you hear this, you'll have a really pretty good interpretation of the song. It's a really, really, really cool track. Yeah, you'll definitely like it.
Excellent.
Their singer Eric Adams is just at the height of his powers on this album. That's why first thing I recommended was "Kingdom Come," because he pulls off a scream in that song that just blow your mind. It is so epic and cool. He's awesome. I love Eric Adams.
It's so metal.
And real quick, last thing I got to mention here in '88 was the year where I, for as much music as I listened to and all that, it was always on the national scene. I really didn't even know that like local scenes really existed outside of like the Sunset Strip. But there was a band from Chicago called Radica, Radakka, Radica. It's kind of a silly name. But we went and saw them in concert. It was one of those things. It was some some theater on the north side of Chicago, and there was like 6 or 7 bands playing, and Radica was the headliner, and they had a couple of demo tapes, and that you could only get them at shows. Maybe you could find one at like a Crow's Nest record store or something. But these guys were so cool. They were heavy, progressive, kind of like a Queensryche type of thing, maybe Metal Church a little bit, in that darker vibe. They weren't like happy-go-lucky, poofy hair, late 80s, that kind of stuff. They weren't like that. But that just opened my eyes to there was this whole scene in Chicago. There were all these cool bands and all these demo tapes. And I went nuts then after that. In 88, 89, I started going crazy collecting all these demo tapes and lamenting the fact that I wasn't 21 yet. So I couldn't get into these, club shows, and started collecting all the clippings and the rock papers that were out at the time advertising all these shows. And they just really opened my eyes to how much music was really out there. On any given weekend, you could go see all these bands playing all over the city. I was like, wow, I can't wait till I turn 21, man.
Yeah, and here it was kind of like at that age, you knew it, and it was pretty relevant, even though we, like you said, too young to get in the clubs and all that. But since a couple of bands got pulled out of this area, and it's a much smaller area as well, there was definitely more of a active, knowledgeable scene. At the moment that you could get into the clubs, you were always there when you discovered it because of the bands that got pulled out. And so it was cool because you're looking at, wouldn't it be cool to live in LA and all that stuff, and where the scenes were. And so, in the Tampa Bay area, it was pretty, when an area gets a couple of bands pulled out, that makes a little bit of a national buzz or something like that, then a lot of bands will flock to here. This could be the next LA, or, this could be like when a lot of the metal bands that didn't make it in LA, and when the early 90s or late 80s and early 90s, when Sub Pop and all that stuff was happening in Seattle, all of a sudden they took the makeup off and bought some flannel. Seattle's going to be the next place to be. So it is. It happened. It happened all the time. There's a lot of bands that didn't make it in the metal genre that, as they were playing in the 90s or late 80s and not making it, to go and do that. But Tampa was like that. There was a lot of bands from out of town and out of this state and out of this area that came here because they thought if one or two, maybe this is the next scene that's going to explode because LA's dead, and you know what I mean. It's just
Right.
it is funny, and if you're not seeing it and into it, how much it is. Like I'm sure, and you're talking about Chicago, Tim, right? Where you grew up?
Yes.
Is that where you grew up?
Yep.
Yeah, which is 50 times bigger back then than Tampa Bay was at that point. So just imagine what that scene was like in the areas that, wherever that music was played. But it'd be cool. Like you look back now, I'm sure, Tim, and you're like, God, why didn't I know about all this stuff?
It's
yeah. Cool.
No, yeah, I still have a lot of those old rock papers, and I look and I see all the bands I could have seen. I could have seen Savatage at some little club in Palatine, Illinois, and I'm like, good Lord, why wasn't I 3 years older?
Exactly. That's how I look back now, because it's like, why couldn't I have, there's these bands that come through. I could have seen this band playing here and that band playing here. But, like you said, yeah, 3 years difference would have made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Well, Tim, at least you can say you went to the Thirsty Whale.
Oh, yeah, a bunch of times. And actually, some of the crowd noise at Manowar's Kings of Metal album was recorded there.
No way, really? Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Wow, cool. Yeah. And we also had, like, down here in this area, like you're talking, we had Mora Sound Studios, which I've talked about in a few of the other years that we've done. So,
right.
There were some pretty heavy hitters in the metal industry that recorded, like, either in Fort Lauderdale or in Tampa, in a couple of these big studios in Central and South Florida. So we would sometimes get these little club shows from these bigger bands who were going out to play a 45-minute set because they were pre-rehearsing a tour or trying out songs they had just recorded in the studio. They would pop up in this little club down in Ybor, because Ybor back then was mostly just metal. Like, it wasn't what it is if you've been to Ybor City. Tim, if you ever come down here, you'll see what it is. But it has a very, like, Spanish Cuban influence. But back then in the 80s, there weren't like a lot of discos and clubs and all. It was metal. Like, there's a lot of metal bars there. So these bands like Skid Row and like all these bands that would come through and play and record and then run through, they would come up from Fort Lauderdale or wherever they were recording, and they would play a 45-minute set in the club, and it was the whole thing where you wouldn't know who they were. All of a sudden, boom, there's Testament on stage at the Rocket Club in Ybor. So, it's kind of neat. It was neat because that kind of stuff really happened around here where, you didn't know what it was going to be. It'd be some band you'd never heard of. Well, let's go in and see what they're like. And then it's, bam, there's this band. Or it was neat. It was really neat.
That does sound cool. So, all right. Well, I'm glad we're able to finally tackle this and get back on track. So let's wrap this one up. What do you guys say?
Yeah, congratulations to 1988. You had a double. You had a double shot of 88 in some aspects.
Yeah.
And some general talk about music. I think that's kind of fun too.
Yeah.
We try to incorporate both. But so on to 89. We have one more year of 80s metal to tackle.
Yes, and it's going to be a good one too. I know that there's a lot of good albums in that year. So
yeah,
awesome. Well, thanks for this time tonight. I mean, we were able to get this back on track. I'm very excited about it, and hopefully we can continue on with some new topics after we finish up 1989.
And I do hear, I see Scott and talk to Scott now and then, so, it's not that big of a deal. But, geez, Tim, it's good to hear your voice. It's been far too long.
Yeah, it's been a long, long, hot summer. Trying to make a Cinderella joke.
Oh,
nice.
Look at what you just did.
Nice. All right, let's see. How about we do a little bit of social media? You can find me at Scott's Eye if you want to see some photography, or at 80's Mixtape, or I'm sorry, 80's Auto Reverse on Twitter also, or on Facebook at 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse. And Tim, what's your Twitter?
That's a personal question. But, no, I'm on Twitter at TSW512. Look for me there.
And Chris?
And at Christopher's Zen on Twitter. So hit us up for some 80s music talk. That'd be great. Always available for shooting a few questions or talking about heavy metal.
Yeah, Chris, man, I can't believe how many followers you have on Twitter. You have like over 2,000.
I'm an amazing human being, Scott. You haven't realized.
Well,
some of it's from music.
Yeah.
Some of it's from sports. My Gators and Bucks and things like that. So
you're always saying something about the Gators. I know that.
Go Gator! Yeah, that's always it's a big part of what I enjoy. It's a hobby. It's not just a sports team. It's probably like the Cubs for Tim or something like that. It's more than just a sports team that you watch. It becomes a part of you.
I know that Rosetta is a Sox fan.
She is a Sox fan, and she's
by
here,
nature,
she can hear you.
Side
so
with her. Hi,
watch
Rosetta.
what you say.
I know you will side with her as far as the teams go in Chicago, but you have to admit this is freaking exciting for the Cubs.
I mean, for any Cub fan, you 50 years ago, you would say, at some point in my life, the Cubs are going to win the World Series. 50 years have passed, and they haven't. And even at that point, it had been more than 50 years since they had won one. So, I mean, a part of you as a sports fan, just to see a town and a fan base get that relief of, my God, we've won something. After it's been 100 and what has been, Tim? Like 1908 was the last time they won it or something like that. It's 108 years. I mean, I'm upset because the Bucks haven't been to a Super Bowl in 14 years. And I mean, 108 years. That's almost, if you think that 3 generations have passed through at different age groups that have never seen the Cubs win a World Series.
Yep.
That's an amazing thing to finally get some relief for, much like it was for the Red Sox back in the early 2000s and stuff like that. But
now, Tim, didn't you just go to a game?
Tim was at the game in 1908. He has a program.
No, were you at one of the San Francisco games in town?
Yeah, I went to Game 2 this past Saturday at Wrigley Field when they won.
Oh, nice! Congratulations, Tim.
How was the atmosphere?
Yeah, it was. No, it was awesome, man. It was really cool. I dug out my first baseball glove that I ever got, which actually had belonged to my grandfather. He's the one who used to take me to Wrigley Field to see Cubs games and stuff. So I had him with me there in spirit. And
dude, that story gives me the chills right now.
That's fantastic.
I'm so excited for you. Oh, if they can pull it off.
And then to have them win too. I mean, and what's really cool is that the very first game he ever took me to was my uncle and I, and we sat in these crappy upper deck reserve seats against the San Francisco Giants, and of course the Giants won that game back in 1977 or whatever it was when I was 6 years old. And now here they beat them in the playoffs in this game I was at, so it was pretty cool.
Wow, nice.
That's
full
fantastic.
Circle. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, my wife being from Chicago, you have some things in common where you're Bears fan, you're Blackhawks fans, and all that stuff. But there's a distinct separation between Cubs and White Sox. But as far as from a sports fan and from a baseball fan, it would be pretty cool to see the city of Chicago just erupt. Like I don't think like any other city ever has or could. If the Cubs, that's the one team that if they won the World Series, I mean, the city would shut down for a week. And I'm serious. I don't even think I'm exaggerating. I literally think that city would shut down for a week just because no one would be sober enough to go to work.
And I'll tell you what, Joe Madden is going to take a pretty big step forward as being the number one coach of Chicago ever. Not just the Cubs, but he might take the limelight away from Mr. Ditka. You know, I mean,
No,
this would be
it won't happen
historical.
because, like Chris was just saying, the Bears apply to the whole city, and the Cubs it's
that's
divided.
true.
So you'll always have half the people that don't care.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
And then you're going to have people, you're going to have people from Tampa who will hate the city of Chicago for the rest of their lives simply because you stole our manager and won a World Series. So,
yeah.
Which, but no, I mean, congratulations. I really do. I mean, I really do. My, the Rays are out of it. I'm more of an Orioles fan than I am any other baseball team. The White Sox aren't there. So, if there's a team that I would like to see kind of win it for the sentimental value and the greatness of the city of Chicago and the sport in general, I tease, but yeah, it would be pretty cool to see the Cubs actually win a World Series.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, legitimately, 21-24 before they'll win a second one? Pretty much?
another 108 years.
Yeah, another 108 years.
If
so
they win now,
21-24, they'll win a second. I guess in a sense you could call that back-to-back. It just back-to-back is 216 years apart.
It's like clockwork, man.
Yeah, it's like clockwork. I mean, you could set your alarm to it. If your alarm was Stonehenge, you could set your alarm to it.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, good luck, go Cubs.
Thanks.
For that respect.
They're not there yet. They still got a little ways to go.
Oh yeah, I don't know. There's a long way to go.
There's a long way. I mean, you got to beat San Francisco in an even year, which, if you know anything about baseball, they pretty much have won it every even year for the last 3 even years. So, and then you're going to have to get past Washington and LA, or one of those two, and then you're going to have to play whoever's in the AL. So yeah, there's a long. It's only the first series, but I mean, if they can get San Francisco up out of here, I think they can beat Washington and the Dodgers and put them in the World Series.
It should be fun.
That'd be really cool. I got to ask you a really quick question because I know everybody wants to go, but I got to ask you a quick question, Tim. Just what do you think would be worse if the Cubs got put out of the playoffs now and you could say, okay, we're getting closer, we're going to go in the next year, or if they make the World Series and they lose in the World Series? Like, from your perspective as a fan, what would be the less heartbreaking outcome? Not saying I hope they do, but I'm always curious about that because some people say, yeah, I'm glad they're out, we can move on to the next year. It's worse if they got all the way to the World Series and then somehow lost it.
No, it would be worse if they lost here. Like, the first worst would be if they lost to the stupid Giants here after being up 2-0, because then you hear all the choking stuff again.
Oh well, that's true too. Yeah, that's true.
That would be the absolute worst. And then losing in the the league championship series, that would be hard to take because this was the year everybody was gearing up for, that they were going to get to the World Series.
Right.
If they made it to the World Series and lost, at least we could say, well, at least we freaking made it to the World Series finally.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's just curious. Just curious how that, because like with the Rays in 2008, it was so new that they had gotten to the World Series and then lost, and it was like, from your perspective, like probably 1984 was when the Cubs were in the World Series, right?
Oh,
am I right?
No.
1940.
They lost. No, they lost to the Padres, right?
Yeah, they were just like this. They were up 2-0. They lost 3 in a row.
Because for the Rays, we thought, well, they're such a young team, they'll go back again, and they never made it back. They never made it back to the World Series. It just, baseball's like that.
Well, that's the thought process with the Cubs, is they got all this young talent, and they're going to be competitive for years to come. So even if they don't win it this year, at least they're going to be in the conversation for the next 5 years. That's what we're all hanging our hats on.
Well, they have a great manager. They have a great front office. And they have the third most stocked and talented minor league system in all of baseball. So that bodes well for your team. So go Cubs. Yeah, I do. Cool. I'm part of me is rooting for your Cubs. I had to give you a hard time with the whole White Sox thing because
No, I know. And this last sports talk, that will be a bonus episode of some other show or something. We'll do something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I know it's getting late. So yeah, just so are we signed off?
No,
Are we done?
Well,
Are we doing
I mean,
sign off?
I'm,
Okay.
We didn't-
I'm still recording, and
Oh, okay.
I mean, we gave out our social media stuff.
Gotcha.
What do you guys think on next week? Thursday again, or how are your schedules?
I should be okay. Thursdays are actually better for me. It's just
Okay.
with this play we're trying to go see. It got screwed up last week, and so now we're going to try to go this Thursday. That's why these last couple of Thursdays have been bad for me. But next week, I don't know the date, October 20th or something, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Whatever that
I
Thursday
think so.
is next week, I should be fine to do 89.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I should be. Yeah, we have a staging in the morning, but it's 9 in the morning. It's going to be about a 6-7 hour staging. So if we could shoot for 8:30 Eastern, that would be good.
Okay. That works for me.
Yeah. So
Cool.
if you guys are cool with that, yeah, I'll definitely.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I'll put that on the calendar right now.
All right. Well.
So.
All right, guys, then I will talk to you soon. We'll be in touch through some kind of message sometime before next week.
Yeah. All right, guys. Cool.
Okay, cool.
Oh,
See
sounds
you
good.
guys later.
All right. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.